Lionel Richie canceled his concert in Chicago tonight at the United Center after an onstage health scare during Wednesday night show in Minnesota.
And now we're hearing from fans who are worried about the Grammy winner's health.
Sit your ass down. That is the sentence Lionel Richie said to a sold-out arena in Minnesota, in the middle of one of his biggest hits, while the room slowly realized something was very wrong. 10 days after that night, the 77-year-old soul legend said almost nothing in public. And when he finally spoke, the words he chose told fans far more than any tabloid headline had managed to explain. On June 24th, Richie kicked off the singer-song all-night-long tour alongside Earth, Wind and Fire at the Grand Casino Arena in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hours before the show, he posted backstage photos on Instagram, full of energy, telling fans he was ready for opening night. For the first hour, everything went exactly as planned. The crowd sang, the horns from Earth, Wind and Fire filled the arena, and Richie moved through his catalog the way he has for nearly 5 decades. Then came Dancing on the Ceiling, a song built for movement, not stillness. And that is exactly when the trouble started. Fans in the crowd noticed it almost immediately. Richie paused mid-song. He walked to a platform on the stage and sat down, something people who had followed him for years said they had never seen him do during that particular number. He did not try to hide it or wave it off. Instead, he leaned into the microphone and, in that unmistakable warm rasp, told the crowd exactly what he was feeling, joking that when you feel dizzy in this business, you learn to sit yourself down. He even added, half laughing, that it was the first time in the entire history of performing that song that he had done it seated, and that this was not exactly a good sign. For a moment, the arena laughed along with him. That is who Lionel Richie has always been on stage, a performer who can turn even an uncomfortable moment into something the crowd feels safe inside. But as the song went on and he stayed seated, something in the room shifted. People stopped filming for fun and started filming out of concern. Whispers moved through the crowd. This did not look like part of the show anymore. Richie moved to the piano and delivered a seated version of 3 Times a Lady. Then he left the stage. Most fans assumed it was simply an early intermission. They had no idea that behind the curtain, paramedics were already being called. According to reporting from the Minnesota Star Tribune, the crowd waited nearly 40 minutes without any real explanation before Earth, Wind and Fire saxophonist Mino Soldo stepped out to tell them plainly that Richie was unwell and the show could not continue. A concert that was supposed to run for an hour and a half ended after less than 1 hour. Offstage, the situation moved quickly. Paramedics met Richie backstage, and he was transported by ambulance to a nearby hospital. The St. Paul Fire Department later confirmed to Fox News Digital that an adult man had been taken from the Grand Casino Arena that night by Fire Department EMS, though officials did not release further medical details. TMZ, citing people close to Richie, reported that the hospital visit was described as a precaution. That single word, precaution, became almost the entire public record of what had happened, at least for a while. What followed said more than any statement could. Richie's team announced that 2 upcoming shows, one at the United Center in Chicago and another at the Scott and Stein Center in Columbus, Ohio, were being postponed on doctor's orders so he could rest and recover. Anyone who has worked around live touring knows that postponing 2 arena shows is never a small decision. It means refunding or rebooking tickets for thousands of people, coordinating with 2 separate venues in 2 separate states, and pulling an entire production off the road with almost no notice. Teams do not make that call over something minor. They make it when a doctor tells them to. The official statement from Richie's camp was short and carefully worded, apologizing for the inconvenience to fans holding tickets and promising that new dates would be announced soon. There was no mention of a diagnosis, no mention of test results, nothing beyond an apology and a promise that Richie, and the tour, would return. For an artist whose entire brand has been built on joy, on optimism, on the kind of music that fills weddings and family reunions, that silence stood out. In the days that followed, one explanation began circulating that a lot of people were eager to accept as the full story. Earth, Wind and Fire drummer John Paris told the Minnesota Star Tribune that Richie had shown no signs of illness before the concert, and that Richie later told him he had simply felt dehydrated. On its surface, that explanation makes sense. Dehydration is common on tour, especially for a performer in his 70s working under hot stage lighting night after night, and it would neatly explain both the dizziness and the seated performance. It would even explain a hospital visit taken purely as a precaution. But there is an important distinction that got lost in a lot of the coverage that followed. That explanation did not come from Lionel Richie himself. It came from a bandmate, secondhand, describing a private conversation. That is not nothing, and there is no reason to doubt John Paris was relaying exactly what he was told. But a fellow musician's account of what an artist said backstage is not the same thing as that artist going on the record about his own health. And as of the most recent reporting available, Richie had not personally confirmed dehydration, or any other specific cause, as the reason behind what happened in St. Paul. Outlets covering the story, including Entertainment Now, explicitly noted that Richie himself had yet to explain what actually caused the hospitalization. That gap, between a second-hand explanation and Richie's own extended silence, is exactly the kind of space where speculation grows. And it did grow. Comment sections and fan forums filled with theories ranging from simple exhaustion after decades of non-stop touring, to quieter, more serious concerns tied to his age, to broader questions about how much longer an artist in his late 70s can keep performing full stage shows under hot lights, night after night, city after city. None of those theories had any confirmation behind them. There were guesses filling a silence that Rich's own team had left wide open, and it is worth remembering that this same pattern, a scary unstage moment followed by vague second-hand explanations and weeks of guessing, has played out before with other aging icons of American music. What makes Rich's response interesting is not what he said, but what he did while staying quiet. On June 30th, just 6 days after being taken to the hospital, Richie was back on stage in Pittsburgh at PPG Paints Arena. For a performer who had just gone through a very public health scare in front of thousands of witnesses, returning to work that quickly sent its own message, even without a single public word of explanation. From there, the tour picked back up in Detroit, and Richie appeared to be performing at full strength, seemingly picking up exactly where he had left off before St. Paul. Still, for 10 full days, he said nothing directly to the fans who had watched those viral clips and spent that time worrying about him. That finally changed on July 4th. Picture that Pittsburgh crowd, many of whom had almost certainly seen the footage from Minnesota before they ever bought their tickets. There was no dramatic unstaged speech about recovery, no emotional thank you to medical staff in front of the audience. Richie simply performed, joked with the crowd the way he always has, and let his presence on stage do the talking that words had not yet done. That choice tells you something about how he chose to handle this entire situation from the very beginning. Rather than getting ahead of the story with a detailed medical explanation, he let his actions, showing up, performing, clearly being on the mend, speak for him. It is a strategy plenty of long-careered stars use when they would rather keep a private health matter from becoming a permanent headline attached to their name. So when Richie finally posted publicly on July 4th, exactly 10 days after the hospitalization, what he actually said mattered as much for what it left out as for what it included. He thanked fans for every message and every kind word, said he was doing well, and expressed gratitude for the outpouring of support. He spoke warmly about his recent shows in Pittsburgh and Detroit, describing the energy in those rooms and the memories made with the crowd, and he told fans he would see them next in Toronto. Read closely, that post confirmed exactly 3 things. Richie is recovering. Richie is grateful. Richie is back on the road. What it did not do, anywhere in its wording, was name an actual diagnosis. He did not confirm dehydration as the cause. He did not point to any underlying condition. He did not use the kind of blunt reassurance celebrities often reach for when they want to shut a story down for good. Instead, he offered warmth, and he offered proof of life through his continued performances, including unstaged jokes in Pittsburgh referencing the very moment that had sent him to the hospital in the first place. That mixture, humor about the incident combined with total silence on the medical specifics, has become